Hello, everyone. As we get ready to wrap up this year and discuss some of our favorite shows, wanted to let you know a few statistics. While we've had hundreds of new subscribers and tens of thousands of views on YouTube, and we've been able to reach 46 countries on according to Spotify, and even with our small but mighty group of listeners and watchers, we ranked in the top 10% of all video podcasts. 73% of our listeners discovered us just this year, so we want to welcome and thank our newest listeners for finding us, and special thanks to more than 300 of you that made us one of your top 10 shows this year. Beyond just listening, there is the option to follow our show, and even though we had over a 50% increase in followers this year, please be sure to follow the show to be notified of new episodes, because you don't want to miss shows like the 7 Liberal Arts and Sciences, which was the most popular show on Spotify and streamed nearly 900% more than our average. Generally, we don't ask for anything in return here other than your time to listen or watch and your comments, and maybe a like and subscribe now and then. And I'd like to take a moment to make a more specific request. As you're listening or watching this episode, if you could do us a favor and make sure you are subscribed on YouTube and are a follower on Spotify, we would really appreciate it. By subscribing on YouTube and becoming a follower on Spotify, it really helps, because then the algorithms will take over and offer our show as a recommendation to other listeners just like you on those platforms. And that's really the main request. Just subscribe or follow us on those platforms. If you are already subscribed on YouTube or following us on Spotify, please consider sharing your favorite episode on social media, or even in a message to a friend that you think might enjoy the content. And finally, if you are really getting something great out of the show, please consider supporting us directly. Over on Spotify, there's this option called Listener Support, where for less than $5 a month, you can help us to keep the show going. As we pay for software and hardware and ads to promote the show, we would really sincerely appreciate it. There's actually a link in the show notes below to make it easy to help support us, and a huge thank you to those that have already made that commitment. To all the thousands of current and past listeners, and to those that will listen or watch in the future, thank you for being part of what we are doing here. And we hope that these episodes, these messages, have been meaningful and supportive to you, whether it's part of your Masonic journey or something more personal. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. With that, on behalf of the Working Tools podcast crew, Stephen and Matt and Craig and myself, have a wonderful new year. Seek wisdom and cultivate virtue. This is the Working Tools podcast.
Welcome to the Working Tools podcast, where today we will continue our discussion of our favorite episodes of 2024.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
Today on the Working Tools podcast, we have our usual host of hosts. I'm Matt Appel. I'm a member of Mill Creek Lodge number 243 in Montlake Terrace, Washington. We have Brother Craig Graham from Kalamalka Lodge number 160 in Vernon, British Columbia. Stephen Chung from Prince Charles number 153 in Kelowna, British Columbia. And David Colbeth from King Solomon Lodge number 60 in Auburn, Washington. And those of you who no doubt have been following the show with bated breath have been wondering for a week now, what was David Colbeth's favorite portion of discussing Freemasons for Dummies? Take it away, sir.
Oh, as long as it's only a week, if I haven't forgotten to publish, and it has been 2 weeks now. Their mouth is really dry. In general, again, I think I mentioned it in the last show. I think I actually kind of twisted your all's arms a little bit to do this Freemasons for Dummies. So thank you for that. But I'm looking forward to getting into the next couple of chapters where we're going to be interviewing folks. I think those are going to be really fun. We'll have some people that are, I finally did get a hold of the International Grand Master of DMLA, which is the adults side of the DMLA, Jeff Brunson. And so he said he would come on the show. He's pretty busy traveling, and he just had surgery on his foot, and yada yada yada. But he did say he'd be on there, and I know that our from the girl side of the rainbow girls, we know the now Supreme Deputy, Supreme something or other. Betty Downing has been elevated to the next level, whatever that is. I always forget what the titles are. But anyway, she'll be on at some point, I'm sure, and we'll have anybody else that will be part of it. But the real question was, what are my favorite shows of Freemasons for Dummies? Well, we did kind of spend an inordinate amount of time on how Freemasonry is organized, which kind of baffles me. It took us that long to talk about. 5 episodes on that. Although I think the symbols of Freemason that we're working on right now is going to crush that record. I have another one too. We'll talk about it a little bit, but honestly, it's not really a show that's my favorite on Freemasons for Dummies. It's a comment that was my favorite. Matt knows what I'm going to say. Do you know what I'm going to say? Yeah. So very early on, the author, Chris Hodap, actually commented. I kind of managed the comments in our YouTube channel, and I was reading through them, and I saw Chris Hodap. I thought, oh, is it a fake? It couldn't be the real guy. And at first his comment was, hey, thanks guys, I really appreciate it. And then that was it. That was kind of no big deal. And then like an episode later or 2 episodes later, he finally said, he wrote this huge response, mostly responses, hey, we like this, we're like that, or I'm the son of Satan, or whatever. It's all, we get all kinds of comments out there. But his response was long and detailed, but he talked about what the purpose of the Dummies book was, basically that, hey, these Dummies books are designed for a 13-year-old boy sitting on a park bench that's been sugared up and restless and doesn't want to pay any attention. I don't know how you spent 60 minutes on the first chapter, basically. But he was gracious and said thank you. And if you happen to be listening, Chris, or anybody knows Chris, of course, we'd love to have him on the show and interview him, maybe even as a kind of a wrap up to the whole book series. So we'll plant that positive juice out there to maybe Chris will consider coming on the shows. But that was my favorite so far, one of the favorite parts of the Freemasons for Dummies books.
That has to be the most polite way ever of expressing the old dead horse comment, doesn't it?
Yes.
Back in my Navy days, we had a hand signal for you were beating the dead horse when someone was doing a briefing, so he could.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's like the old wrap it up,
Yep.
That way. Yeah.
You see the hook coming from outside.
Yeah, I've enjoyed the Freemasons for Dummies overall. I feel like it is, how to phrase this, it has acted as a skeleton where we have, unsurprisingly for us, managed to veer off in various directions and include things that are not in the book and that sort of thing. And it's been a
framework,
a path to follow that we can then wander through the countryside and sort of generally go in that direction. But we get to talk about a whole lot of stuff. I mean, like bringing Jeremy Yielding in, for instance, to discuss the Morgan affair or that sort of thing, that it sort of gives us an excuse to talk about these other things, even if we're not strictly talking about exactly what it says in the book. And I've enjoyed that a lot, for sure.
Yeah, Jeremy's comments was one of the other one that I hadn't got to yet. It was great. Yeah, we jokingly say in my little sphere that we can listen to Jeremy read the phone book, and he's really, really great, and he's well read on that topic and many others. But I think he said he did that back in college, didn't he? He developed that program when he was in college, I believe, which was, Jeremy's about our age, and so it's been a little while.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Those were excellent episodes that we did. Very, very informative.
Yeah, I think our do you know, David, the statistics of the viewings and listenings of the shows for that series of the book?
I could possibly figure out some of those. I did kind of scan back, and I noticed that many of the shows on Freemasons for Dummies, I don't know if it's the topic that's searched and found, or if it's the content, or how exactly the search algorithms work. But yes, the Freemasons for Dummies seem to have been a more interested viewership. Now it also could be that because we've increased viewership as well. So, or we've increased number of subscribers as well. And so there could be just more people watching it. It still strikes me when in Spotify, you can't go back and look at a date range of episode volume. And so you can only see all time history. And so welcome to the Working Tools podcast. The first episode is the most popular, of course, by all far. And some days I think, gosh, should I delete those first few episodes because it's not our current format. Those are wonderful shows. They're really fun to go back and watch and listen to, you and Connor and the other Dave getting started. And it's really fun to see the roots and the history of the show. But it doesn't reflect, if somebody were to come in and listen to that first couple, 2-3 shows, it's completely different than what we're doing now. So hopefully people listen to the current show as well.
Yeah, I've also thought about what should we delete those, and then no, you know what? It shows our growth, and it shows our how we've evolved into where we are now.
Yeah, for sure.
And plus it does give credit to those who were here when we started, right?
Absolutely.
They're not all here anymore, right? So I think it's good to leave them there, right?
Plus, if you're deleting old episodes to change the statistics, that's just cooking the books.
Well, no, we wouldn't want to delete them just to change the statistics, but I get what Dave's saying. It's not
maybe
the
a little
format,
bit.
Right?
Maybe a little bit.
Right?
What did my grandpa used to say? Figures lie and liars figure. He wasn't an accountant.
Right. But I think looking forward to 2025. Doing more interviews, and like you say, I'm really looking forward to the interviews of the bodies, the concordant bodies that are coming up as we wrap up the Freemasons for Dummies series, right? I think that's going to be some interesting tidbits, right? I know we've got Al Akers, who's in BC here. He's I think actually principal officer in every part of in every body of the Royal Arch currently. Principal officers. That's the top 3 officers for those who aren't familiar. He's a very busy guy. Plus, he's our current DDGM, so he's got a full plate this year. And they convinced him to go back to work this year. One of the churches needs a pastor, so I think maybe he's scheduling it to fill up time after he gives up one of those chairs or something. I don't know how he's going to fit it all in. But the other guys, if we can get some Scottish Rite guys, it should be a very interesting year.
Yeah, for sure. I as we go through this book too, I think Matt said it as well, that we could, it helps us to give us a framework, but a roadmap, if you will, to where we want to go. But we could have just talked about it at a very high level and just said, oh, this is what the book says, basically, and gone through it kind of like the intent of it is. But I also appreciate that we've really dove into things. And again, not going back to try and bloviate about Craig's addition to the podcast, but he's had some really wonderful comments and knowledge about some of the details, especially the history of Freemasonry and things that I have no clue. I had no clue about. So I missed Trevor and Jared and those guys that had those kind of knowledge. And it's been really wonderful having Craig to fill in that and to be part of that. And of course, Matt has a lot of knowledge too. No offense, Steve, but you and I are just kind of we're the comedy part of the show, I think.
You're willing to do the editing, so we keep you around.
Yeah, exactly. You can't fire him. And so I appreciate that it gives the opportunity to really dive in if you want to, but we don't have to. And hopefully it encourages guys to go and learn, people. I shouldn't say always guys, because there's ladies that listen to us, although 99% of the says that 99% of our listeners are male. That we would hope that they would say, oh, that was interesting. How does that work, or learn more about it? One of the impotents for suggesting the book was, I talk about it on the show, so I'm sorry to repeat it, but when I was master the first time 12 years ago, my wife wanted to be involved. We had young kids, but she wanted to be involved with the ladies. And so she had a book club in the dining room for the first half hour or so once we went into the lodge, into our meeting. And she was trying to figure out a book to use. And I said, I got it in with Wiley Publishing. Why don't you do Freemasons for Dummies? She said, okay. So they were reading it. And a few weeks or months into it, I had some guys coming up and asking me, saying, hey, what do you teach him? What is your wife teaching my wife? What do you mean? What is she teaching her? He goes, she's coming home and asking me questions that I don't know. I said, well, then maybe you should read the book.
Speaking of oddities that have happened, we have a seeker in our 6-step program for Prince Charles Lodge that, through listening to the Working Tools podcast, that has caused him to want to join Freemasonry, and he came across it one day, just on a random search, and he decided he was going to listen to our podcast. And Connor, he reached out a couple months ago now, and so we've right now he's working on his memory test that we give before we'll take his petition. But that was one of the first in the first conversation we had with him. That was what he had mentioned. So I think that's pretty cool. He's listened to enough of the podcast to know that he wants more, and this is what he wants. So I think that's pretty cool.
Well, there's one.
There's one, right? Hey, but you know what?
We're on the way. We're on the way. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, it's like everything else, though. With all the efforts that you put in, you wonder, is it really worth all the effort that you put into doing various things and various projects? And then, there's that one time that you hear something like that, and it makes it all worthwhile, right? Well, I mean, we've got other things that make it worthwhile, but it is really cool to know that we've got one seeker through the podcast, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I think anyone who came to us through the podcast, I wouldn't let them
in. and that's only though because I'm part of the lodge, and who knows how many have petitioned other lodges or sought out other lodges because of it, right? So that would be a real cool stat to know, though.
That would be, as a matter of fact. Hey, listeners, if you've joined Masonry, you can advance in Masonry, stuck with Masonry because of our podcast, or frankly, we just want to know what you think, because while we like to hear ourselves talk, we like to pretend that someone's listening. So if you could let us know what you think, that would be great. I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, the Working Tools Podcast at gmail.com.
Oh yeah, I should probably tell them that. Yeah, good call there, Steve.
Just go to the website, theworkingtoolspodcast.com. That's a great spot to go, or a comment on YouTube. You can actually comment on Spotify as well. We don't talk about commenting on Spotify. A lot of people are just listening, or they're running or driving or whatever. And so there is a feature you can comment on Spotify. And so I do look for those. I don't see any, unfortunately, on Spotify. I do see them on YouTube. YouTube, of course, is a little more interactive and promotes that idea for comments. But right on the workingtoolspodcast.com website, there is a contact us page. And so if you wanted to reach out to us, you can do that on there.
So out of curiosity, do you guys know about how many Masons there are in British Columbia and Yukon?
What is it, Steve? Around 7,500 now?
I think so.
Yeah.
So we've got about nine. If you count EAs and FCs, last time I looked, we had about 9,300 here in Washington. So that's 17,000. Let's call it 17,000 Masons, more or less. And heck, that means if we're getting 1,000 people to listen, that's a pretty good percentage.
Right?
I like it.
For sure. And it's pretty cool. I think I mentioned on the last episode that we've actually been able to reach 46 countries. If there's folks listening to us in 46 countries, or at least they're using some VPN that indicates that they're in up to 46 countries.
Yeah, the Onion router will send you. Yeah,
That's exactly right.
Well, the last stat that was on the Grand Lodge website before it was taken down for or before they stopped publishing it because they're working on the new one is 6,191 members in BC and the Yukon. And that was from 2021. So 2022 would be nice to know.
This brings to mind a story that I heard there was a grand officer from Oregon speak one time, and he said, he got up and said, I'd love to bring you greetings from the 25,000 Masons of Oregon, but there's only 5,000 of us, so I can't do that.
Well, I was looking because there's a couple of history books that the Grand Lodge of BC has published, and the one that was published for the 100th year in 1971, I think you know it, Steve, the big blue one.
Yep.
Has got statistics in it, and I think in 1962 or 63 was the height in British Columbia, and it was around 27,000. For a population in the province, it's quite a bit smaller than it was now. And I know that Washington State has always had more people than BC has, and has had a larger Masonic cohort as well. I think at that time it was probably around 35,000 in Washington State. So we've have come down a long way, but yet we're still around.
Yeah. We should get some sort of a membership committee together to look at that sort of thing.
Yeah, you think that'd be good, huh?
I say that because David's on the Grand Lodge. Actually, he's about just about every Grand Lodge committee.
I'm not on membership anymore.
You're not?
No, matter of fact, I'm not on membership. That's what I'm not on. However, I do know a guy. We all know a guy. I'm not sure Craig has met Very Worshipful Zane McCune. He actually has done some research, some historic research in detail about membership statistics in Washington. I don't think out of our jurisdiction, but he has some very interesting statistics and bumps of how things shifted due to the war, World War II, and then also the 2006. I think he calls it the Dan Brown effect, is his way he comments it. I would consider that I would be a Dan Brown or a National Treasure baby is what I call myself, because that's when I came in 2008.
Oh yeah,
there's a bubble or a bump, if you will, of those folks that came in. But again, we're off topic, but that's not really.
I kind of feel like nobody was really volunteering their favorites, so I wasn't going to push it, honestly. But are there any other favorites lurking out there that somebody wants to bring up?
I think one of the first ones I looked at when I was asked to do a one episode guest spot on the podcast here, and look where that's led. I went back to an episode you guys did about 2.5 or 3 years ago, and it was the Prince Hall Grand Master of Washington.
Yeah,
that was I ended up watching it a couple of times. It was really a good episode.
Yeah, Julius Brown. I loved those recordings. That was a really good time. He was a great speaker. Actually, I would still love to have us. We have BC and Yukon represented. We have Washington represented. The Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Washington jurisdiction encompasses both. I think they only have one lodge in British Columbia, but that's besides the point. I wouldn't mind having a permanent. If we get Julius Brown to be on the show permanently, I think that would be great. He was a great. Again, just well informed, really knew what he was talking about, and just fun to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
That's almost. I mean, I guess maybe I'm saying the obvious, but the fact that they know what they're talking about goes hand in hand with their fun to talk to, in my opinion. There's not if someone could know everything, but if they're not enjoying talking to them, then what's the point? So
yeah,
you sort of. It's like, like me, you'd want someone who's both brilliant and very funny, except too bad we can't hear Steve right now, because otherwise I'm sure it would have been him. But nope. Steve has no audio. Oh, well, it looks like we can say all sorts of things about him now.
We're almost done anyway.
All right. Does anybody else have any others that you'd like to bring up in the last year or two? I'm not hearing
Year
any.
2, boy, I don't know.
Oh, I figured I'd cast the net a bit wider.
Well, I do want to say, kind of going back to the Common Square Masters, just as a quick segue, I had like a top 5 shows episodes that I really liked, and Very Worshipful Paul Ingham, the Grand Chancellor of United Grand Lodge of England, was really fun. He had that great British humor and English, I guess not really British, but English way of speaking, and it was just really fun to talk with him. Of course, we totally, both Matt and I, fanboyed completely when we had Worship Brother Maynard Edwards on with the Tyler's Place, and so we were supposed to. There is an open invite, folks, so we should probably figure out a time and day, at least in 2025, while Maynard's still running that, and we have an invite to come on. Somebody else takes over, they might say, "Who are you?" And then
Chris Rulli was another good one when he was talking about his book, and he was really interesting.
I felt, you guys outweigh, like I said, Steve and I are kind of the comedic relief on the show. And so talking, when Chris was on, man, I felt like this big. I think I said to Matt afterwards, if I could just have half of his dialogue, his vocabulary. Sometimes people like that just speak so eloquently. And of course it's because they're learned, but there's words that sometimes people use. I often say, there's no reason to cuss necessarily. Sometimes it brings colorful language to the conversation, but there is so many other words that could be used that would describe that exact statement or idea rather than just a cuss word. And it's so beautiful when those are used and you just slaughter somebody with accurate words that it isn't a cuss word, right? And of course, Most Worshipful Akram Elias was really, really special it was neat to have him on the show. I really, really appreciated his comments. And anyway.
So I guess what we're saying is all the episodes are really great, and everyone should go back and listen to all of them over again. That's the upshot of this episode, I think.
There you go.
So yeah, I want to thank you for listening. Again, please let us know what your favorite episodes were, what you'd like to hear in the future. We're always open to suggestions. I would like to personally say a thank you both to you three guys. I've periodically I try and look at my life and see what I value in life, and this time that we set aside for this, I personally really find value in, and I just think it's great, and I want to thank the three of you, and I also want to thank our predecessors who came before us, Jared and Connor, and the other guy who started the pod who we interviewed one time.
Dave Harrigan, and Trevor McNeil.
And Trevor. Yep.
I want
to thank those guys for getting it started along with Steve and getting things going and making it what it is today. And I really, like I said, I value this, and I just think it's fun and cool. So thank you all very much. And thank you for listening to the Working Tools podcast on behalf of myself and David and Stephen and Craig. Man, I almost forgot your name there. I'm thanking you and I'm forgetting your name. That's a great move. So yeah, thank you all for listening to the Working Tools podcast, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Goodbye.
Hello, everyone. As we get ready to wrap up this year and discuss some of our favorite shows, wanted to let you know a few statistics. While we've had hundreds of new subscribers and tens of thousands of views on YouTube, and we've been able to reach 46 countries on according to Spotify, and even with our small but mighty group of listeners and watchers, we ranked in the top 10% of all video podcasts. 73% of our listeners discovered us just this year, so we want to welcome and thank our newest listeners for finding us, and special thanks to more than 300 of you that made us one of your top 10 shows this year. Beyond just listening, there is the option to follow our show, and even though we had over a 50% increase in followers this year, please be sure to follow the show to be notified of new episodes, because you'll not miss shows like the 7 Liberal Arts and Sciences, which was the most popular show on Spotify and streamed nearly 900% more than our average. Generally, we don't ask for anything in return here other than your time to listen or watch and your comments, and maybe a like and subscribe now and then. And I'd like to take a moment to make a more specific request. As you're listening or watching this episode, if you could do us a favor and make sure you are subscribed on YouTube and are a follower on Spotify, we would really appreciate it. By subscribing on YouTube and becoming a follower on Spotify, it really helps, because then the algorithms will take over and offer our show as a recommendation to other listeners just like you on those platforms. And that's really the main request. Just subscribe or follow us on those platforms. If you are already subscribed on YouTube or following us on Spotify, please consider sharing your favorite episode on social media, or even in a message to a friend that you think might enjoy the content. And finally, if you are really getting something great out of the show, please consider supporting us directly. Over on Spotify, there's this option called Listener Support, where for less than $5 a month, you can help us to keep the show going. As we pay for software and hardware and ads to promote the show, we would really sincerely appreciate it. There's actually a link in the show notes below to make it easy to help support us, and a huge thank you to those that have already made that commitment. To all the thousands of current and past listeners, and to those that will listen or watch in the future, thank you for being part of what we are doing here. And we hope that these episodes, these messages have been meaningful and supportive to you, whether it's part of your Masonic journey or something more personal. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. With that, on behalf of the Working Tools Podcast crew, Stephen and Matt and Craig and myself, have a wonderful new year. Seek wisdom and cultivate virtue. This is the Working Tools Podcast.